Hi there, it's so great to see you. I'm Jenny Kirk, welcoming you up here to We're Yard. And today we're going to be following on from the series that I did where we showed all of the Class 08 shunters and the terriers too. And what I actually want to show you today is my rat infestation. I've got 19 of these Class 25s. And today I'm going to run through and show you every single one from my fleet. So come with me in association with Chromatic, makers of DCC decoders and accessories that are designed by enthusiasts for enthusiasts. Browse the full range available to buy today at tramfabrique.co.uk. Additional support comes from Rocar Prototype Models, where detail, accuracy and value for money go hand in hand. With their debut model of SafePack auto racks wowing model railroaders alike, now is your chance to order these in road names and configurations to accurately reproduce auto rack workings from 1974 to the present day on your model railroad. Order today from rocarmodels.com and see the full range for yourself. But without further ado, it's always great to invite you up here to Weir Yard and show you a little bit more of my fleet. Class 25s were known as rats, quite simply because they got everywhere on Britain's railways, from the day they were first introduced right through to the end of the 1980s, just tipping over into the 1990s. These jacks of all trades really could be seen anywhere on the network. They also last quite well in preservation, and a number of preserved lines do offer restored examples to still be able to ride behind these go-anywhere venerable old girls. And therefore it's one of those locomotive types that really no layout that portrays that period at any point should be without. Weir Yard is no exception to this, and I do have quite a lot of Class 25s. And the first up that I'm going to show you is the two-tone green variants. The Class 25s actually wore this livery exceptionally well, and it made a very colourful change from the all-over green, which a lot of the earlier diesels came to traffic with. These, I believe, had the small yellow panels from new. I'm not aware of any Class 25s with just plain green ends, although I stand to be corrected on that. Now, this body shell is from one of the early releases, I do believe, and certainly back in the day, I had a really great job as a researcher for a journalist, worked as well for the BBC on a freelance basis, and quite simply, a lot of disposable money. The models coming in from China were actually very favourably priced, and I picked up almost every version of the Class 25 that Bachmann released right at the start. These have the plastic fantastic handrails, very prone to getting damaged, and certainly they were probably the big Achilles heels of these models. Same with the Class 08 diesel shunter as well. The chassis itself is a later one that's been retrofitted. The reason for this was that at some point I swapped the chassis out to put in a body shell that I got for cheap from somewhere, and it was just a cheap way of getting a BR Tops Blue Class 25, I seem to recall. And then later on, I think I managed to buy a chassis cheap, and I'm not even sure whether that's the appropriate chassis. Come to think of it, I have a feeling that this should actually be without the water tank, but we're splitting hairs a little bit. Certainly I always thought that the difference between the 25.2 and the 25.3 was simply the addition or lack of the water tank for the steam heat boiler, but I'm told that's not entirely always the case. Certainly Bachmann tooled up for the 25-2 and the 25-3 initially, and they were a great model, light years ahead of the previous Hornby model, which really showed its toy-like qualities by comparison. And certainly the 25-2 and 25-3 had never been catered for by that Hornby model. I don't have many of these earlier BR Green period locos, but certainly whilst they don't run often on wear yard, I do have two of these, and I think this is a genuine full-on 25-2 with the water tank, and we've got the running number D5237. And this was purchased second hand for a really great price. Couldn't ignore it, even though I wasn't as interested in the BR Green D number period, but certainly this is a great example. If you're wondering about the magnets, this model was retrofitted with these DCC Concepts power base magnets for doing a video actually whilst I worked there, and the difference in haulage power was actually quite phenomenal. The locomotives itself all feature all-wheel drive, all-wheel pickup, and certainly have always been faultless performers. With the metal handrails now appearing, these locomotives had the only major foible fixed on them, and certainly they would go through a few little upgrades, originally appearing with an 8-pin DCC chassis. This was then upgraded to 21-pin at the same time that the locomotives gained directional lighting, and also a cutout in the chassis to cater for a speaker for sound-fitted models. Those are the only BR Green versions that I have, but there are some other quirky transition period liveries. We're moving now to the 25-1 locomotive that Bachmann introduced a little bit later on. As you can see, the body sides on these are correct with the extra grills, and these locomotives look a lot more like the Class 24s. In fact, I believe that they are very, very similar to the 24-1s. But certainly these came out quite a long time ago. The original ones were just on an 8-pin chassis, although they very quickly got upgraded to 21-pin and directional lighting. This is a 21-pin model, and it's the chromatic blue, not the rail blue, and a handful of these on the London Midland region were treated thus before the standards for rail blue were kind of nailed down. So we've got the ferret and dartboard and the D number, this chromatic blue, and the small yellow ends. And I always think the cabs do look weird in blue, but without the yellow panels all the way up. This was produced as an exclusive for Model Zone back in the day, and that just shows how long ago that was now. Model Zone, of course, is sadly missed. And I actually bought this because I went in wanting a different model. I can't even remember what the model was I was waiting for. I had money burning a hole in my pocket. I wasn't going to leave without something. So I bought this special commission model. And indeed, I've grown to like it an awful lot over the years. Now I'm going to put these three to one side and get the next three locomotives to show you. The next locomotive is the first of the Heljan Class 25s that they introduced. Now, Heljan brought their 25 to the market comparatively recently, and this D7661 is actually the review sample that they sent over, and I subsequently used it and another one in a project video for fitting independently switched cab lighting. Now, I can't remember whether the video featured this one, but I did the test fitting to make sure I had the proof of concept good in my head before I started filming on the other one, or vice versa. But certainly this model now features independently switchable cab lighting, and it's quite an easy introduction to do. There's a lot more finesse on the Heljan model, although surprisingly It's lighter as well than the Bachmann version. We've got a lot of separately fitted detail, and this does show that this is a model that's probably around 20 years apart from the original Bachmann 25 releases. There's a lot of cab detail on these, which you really couldn't see without a cab light, and it was one of the reasons that prompted me to go for that project. Like the Bachmann version, we've got all-wheel pickup and all-wheel drive, and these are, again, faultless performers. And certainly, they are a really good model, but for me, not enough better than the Bachmann ones to warrant the retiring wholesale of my Bachmann fleet. So you can actually run the Heljan 25 and the Bachmann 25 together without actually having one detract from the other. That's the last of my D-numbered Class 25s, and we move on to the liveries that I actually really do like, and I've been actively collecting these since the outset. The next model that I'm going to introduce is the rail blue one, and I'm going to actually do these in tops number order that were released. Now, this is a Bachmann model. It's the 25-1, and this was originally part of a set, although I bought it second-hand, split from that set. 25034 is one of the named Class 25, so we've got here Aberystwyth Castle, which also has the Welsh version of that above. These are all bilingually named, and we've got a lot of printed detail on here. Shed code 89C, and it's certainly one which I've seen around secondhand a lot, and it does have a few little quirks as per the prototype. I do like the 25034 on the front there. And certainly it's a good solid model. It's a 21-pin chassis model. But all round, I was really happy to add it secondhand for, at the time, not that much money, it has to be said. And you can still find the Bachmann 25 secondhand for a really reasonable price. The next locomotive is quite an interesting one. 25043 is still in its original all-over rail green with the lime green stripe at the bottom, grey roof, and the ferret and dartboard lake crest, BR crest, although it's got the rail blue fitted panel here, obviously modelled on a prototype that's received a spare part in works that's kind of been drawn from stores pre-painted. But actually the rest of the locomotive has not at this point received a repaint. Now this did happen, and it's an interesting period where the rail blue of the 70s was broken up somewhat by some of these BR green diesels persisting. With the tops number applied and the full yellow ends, certainly this is an interesting livery combination. 21-pin chassis, and I have actually retrofitted sound into this model, and it's one of 3 sound-fitted models in my collection. The next Class 25 from my fleet is 25052. It's a Bachmann model of a 25-1, and I believe it was the first to be released with the upgraded 21-pin chassis back in the day. It's also factory weathered, and actually quite a nice factory weathering application. Certainly it's something that Bachmann does do really quite well. This particular model is fitted with a Zen Black decoder, which does mean that it is able to use the ABC shuttle sections. So you do often see this model above many of the other 25s shuttling happily backwards and forwards on Weir Yard, and it's been a faultless performer doing that. Only 2 numbers out from that is 25054, also a 25-1. But this, whilst it's only 2 numbers different, and did actually come out not that long before, is actually the very last of the 8-pin chassis, and that means that this model does not feature directional lighting and also doesn't have the cutout for a speaker. So it's something that does inhibit it, I guess, a little bit, although you do see 25054 around an awful lot second hand, and it does surprise me actually why it should be. Certain locomotives can be found really easily and others just don't seem to come up all that much. The next locomotive was the first ever that was issued factory weathered from Bachmann for the Class 25s, and it's 25083. Now this is a 25-2 model, I believe, so we've got the smoother sides that we saw before on some of the earlier models that I showed you. And this particular locomotive, actually, I believe that this is a survivor. It's up at the Caledonian Railway, I believe, and 25083 was the subject of a court case. It's the locomotive, if I remember correctly, that was nearly stolen. And you'd think, how difficult is it to steal a locomotive? But so I remember hearing there was a case involving this locomotive being sent for scrap, but not officially sent for scrap, and somebody sold it on the sly. There was a court case. It dragged on, and as a result, 25083 survived long enough to be preserved. It's quite a big thing to actually try and steal an actual railway locomotive, but certainly if the story that I was told has truth in it, then that is actually the way that 25083 survived for preservation. Interestingly enough, the next Class 25 is actually the first one that I ever bought. I bought this brand new when the Bachmann Class 25s first appeared, and 25087 was the model that they first released from the then new tooling. It has the plastic fantastic handrails, as you can see, very, very prone to damage, and it's an 8-pin socketed chassis, although at the time I didn't even know what DCC was. I don't even remember that Bachmann drew attention to DCC back then. And you're talking about a model that's probably in the region of 20 years or more old. Still a great performer, despite the fact that it's getting on a bit. And certainly it's one which at the time was very, very cherished. And along with 24081, which was the very first Class 24 release from Bachmann, what it told me was that actually I loved the tops numbered rail blue locomotives. The next locomotive is here, 25095. This, I believe, was originally released as, I think it was a sound-fitted model, but I bought this where somebody clearly swapped the chassis because they wanted the sound-fitted chassis for the model that they preferred. And so I got the combination of this body on a non-DCC fitted chassis for probably only at the time maybe about £20. It was quite a good price, I remember, even then. Now 25095 had the peculiar quirk of these black window surrounds and 25095 written backwards, as if you're going to be reviewing what you're seeing in the rear view mirror of the train in front. And actually 25095 I remember featuring quite prominently in photographs of the Vic Berry pyramid of Class 25s when she met her end, but certainly a little bit of a minor celebrity when she was running. She had the silver picked out window surrounds, so a few little depot embellishments that make 25095 stand out from some of the other Class 25s. The next model, we're going back to Heljan, and it's again a two-tone green one this time, which received its tops number without a full repaint. This was done as a special commission for TMC, and it's, as far as I'm aware, the only Class 25 that's been released with 25-1 and then 2 digits. For some reason, that particular number sequence has been very, very poorly represented in model form. Although I think off the top of my head there may be one other, 25155 from Heljan, which is a model. Spoiler alert, I don't actually have that one, but it is one that at the right price I do want to pick up. 25102 though was a bit of a celebrity for, I believe, being the final Class 25 to retain the green livery for the longest length of time, surviving actually quite late. And You can see patch painted, a green patch with 25102 on, full yellow ends, and it really is quite a striking livery combination, and certainly one which is well worth having for anybody who just wants to break up the monotony of all those rail blue locomotives in that kind of mid to late 70s period. And certainly I got it when TMC had a sale on, and got it for a really good price, it must be said. The next trio from my fleet, we're going to start off with 25231, and we're back to a reissue of the 25-1 from Bachmann, again 21-pin chassis in this, and certainly it's one which has proven very, very difficult to track down if you missed it when it was first released, and I'm not entirely sure why that might be the case. The next few models, for some reason, are really difficult, by and large, bar a couple of exceptions, to find on the second-hand market. There's nothing really to write home about with this model. It's just a reissue of the Class 25-1 as 25231, full yellow ends, factory weathering, and certainly it's, again, a run-of-the-mill rat, but quite happy to add it to my collection, and it did take a long time to track down. The next model, we're kind of yo-yoing backwards and forwards between Bachmann and Heljan, and I did buy quite heavily as well into the Heljan releases when they came out. I think there's two more that I need to track down, of which 25155 is one, and from memory 25093 is the other one. But I did get 25252, and this is again I think this is the 25-3 variant. We're missing the water tanks because these didn't have the steam heat boilers, and certainly you can see on these where the Heljan 25 really stands up to scrutiny is this lower level detail is much more refined than we get on the Bachmann models. Again, there's not really anything to write home about 25252, other than we've got this cream roof panel. I can't imagine they stayed cream for long. And the only other locomotive I've got which mimics that is the D7661, which I showed you earlier. And I'm guessing that it can only really have been an embellishment for a particular depot or region. I'm not entirely sure why, but certainly it does provide a little bit of something different to look at with your fleet of 25s. The final from these three, we're back to Bachmann, and this 25276, again, really difficult to find this model. Did eventually track it down. It is the factory fitted sound variety, and this does still have its factory sound in here, and it really is quite good. I bought it because I just really wanted a sound fitted Class 25, and I also wanted this particular tops running number. Just have a real thing for gotta get them all, a bit like Pokemon. Other than that, and other than its sound fitted, again, nothing really to write home about with this livery. Certainly everything else about this is, again, run-of-the-mill Class 25s, but it is really nice to have a factory sound fitted version. The next model from my fleet, again, is one of the really early purchases that I made. 25279 is a 25-3, and actually it was the first ever release from the tooling without the water tanks from Bachmann. And 25279 does have the distinction of being a preserved locomotive. I have a feeling that she is the locomotive that I rode in the cab of at the Great Central Railway Northern, and she was at Ruddington, painted at the time in two-tone green, but certainly the footage I got from back then is pretty grim. It was filmed on a BlackBerry mobile phone, remember those? So it's probably not even worth trying to show you too much of that, if any at all. But Bachmann have also released this model multiple times, certainly this identity, and I'm not sure why that might be. Certainly As far as I know, it's the only Class 25 model that they have duplicated in that way, and the only difference being that the re-release is on a 21-pin chassis and features factory weathering, but it's therefore one which I'm not attracted to getting because I already have 25279. The next Class 25, and we're nearly there, so just do bear with me, 25286, again bought second hand, a little bit easier to find 25286, again no reason or rhyme as to why certain running numbers are plentiful and others aren't, but again, there's not really anything special to say about this particular locomotive other than it's just a handy re-release of the 25 from the tooling with a different running number, and certainly anybody who's like me, you really do welcome these because I'm addicted to buying these rats. The next locomotive is Tamworth Castle. Of course, the celebrity final survivor ran a great deal of rail tours right to the end, passed into preservation, and also released in this particular livery, often sometimes referred to as ice cream van livery. We've got that silvery grey roof, BR rail blue, but we've got the wraparound yellow cabs coming all the way back to the cab doors. Also numbered as 25912. This was really just a paper renumbering exercise. The 25 nines, I believe, were a class, subclass of something around 10 Class 25s that were selected for some traffic that BR was bidding for, something to do with ICI, possibly salt traffic around the Runcorn area. So they chose 10 probably best condition Class 25s, gave them a rudimentary spruce up and renumbered them into the 25-9 category. In the end, that traffic wasn't won, so those 10 locomotives pretty much got withdrawn about the same time as all of the other 25s, with the exception of Tamworth Castle, which became a rail tour locomotive with BR, and received the name Tamworth Castle. Later on got repainted back into the heritage two-tone green. Bachmann did produce quite early on a model of her in that livery as well. Again, really easy to find that. But this livery from the Bachmann model was done as a special for, I believe, Model Rail. Very difficult to get hold of. So it was quite fortuitous that Heljan chose to release Tamworth Castle in this livery when they chose to release their own Class 25, and I snapped it up. It's one of the two models which I did the cab light fitting to, so this does have independently switched cab lighting, but I can't remember whether this was the one that featured in the video or the other one was. Certainly I did one first as a proof of concept and then I filmed the video. But I'm really pleased to have it in my collection. Quite an eye-catching livery, but certainly when the Model Rail version was out back in the day, I shunned it, and I'm not entirely sure why. I think at the time I really didn't like these wrap-around yellow ends. Didn't like them on 37s, certainly didn't like them on the 25s, but the livery has grown on me. And that brings us to the final Class 25 in my collection. And it's in intercity livery as Ethel 3. Now, Ethel stands for Electric Train Heat X Locomotive. Very, very imaginative. It's number 3. There were 3 of them. And this is the only one that Bachmann have produced a model of. It was produced for the London Toy Fair as a special, and then those that were left over were sold via the Bachmann Collectors Club, and I actually snapped it up. Not difficult to find these models for some reason, but I got it because I absolutely love intercity livery, and what it shows is that the Class 25 really does pull off this livery quite well. It would be lovely to see a Class 25 actually receive this livery in preservation with a regular tops number. Of course, the Ethels couldn't run under their own power. In order to reduce weight, including in particular unsprung weight, the traction motors were removed, and their sole purpose was to provide electric train heat to the coaching stock on things like steam rail tours, and at the time they were the scourge of the enthusiasts. You can imagine in this livery slapped in between a steam locomotive and some maroon coaching stock, they must have looked very out of place. None of the Ethels did survive, although they were the last 25s pootling around on the network, albeit being towed. And when the 37 fours were actually introduced, then the whole reason for these kind of faded away and they were withdrawn and scrapped. This is the only one, I believe, to get the intercity livery, although Heljan have produced one of the other versions. It may actually even be Ethel 3 in her previous two-tone blue-grey livery, which again, very interesting livery, but in service, Class 25s never carried it other than the Ethels. One interesting thing about the Ethel is that we've got these blanked out middle cab windows as per the prototype, but this is a fully working model. Unlike the real Ethels, this is just a standard Class 25 underneath the body shell, including directional lighting, although the top lights don't actually light up if I remember correctly. So essentially all she can show is red tail lights, but certainly she will run fully geared, fully fitted with a motor. Unlike the Heljan ones, they actually specified a model without motor and gear train so they could freewheel, although they were available at the same price, and that appears to have actually really hurt sales of the Heljan Ethels, and does mean that you can pick them up quite easily even at the time of recording this video. And that completes the tour of all of the rats in my fleet. Certainly 19 of them is quite a collection for any layout, and what it does show is that I think I do have a little bit of a rat problem in the railway room here. There's probably quite a few people who would disagree with me and say you never can have too many. And at the moment there are 2 more that I do want to add to the fleet, and I did talk about them in the video a little bit, and I'm sure that both Heljan and Bachmann will be releasing more of these in time to come. So 19 is just a holding pattern, as there will almost certainly be more of these machines here on Weir Yard. And actually I've really enjoyed showing you the entire fleet of these. Certainly quite a few of these don't actually get out and about on the layout as often as perhaps they should, and maybe now that I've got them all out from storage to show you them, I might run them just a little bit more often. But until next time, this is me, Jenny Kirk, saying I hope you enjoyed this video. Do please tickle the like button, share this video, and subscribe to the channel too to be the first to know about new videos as and when they go up. And of course, I'd love to hear from you in the comments section down below. What Class 25s do you have in your fleet? Have you seen any here today in amongst this collection that you think, actually I didn't know they did that one, and maybe you're going to be going and looking and tracking it down. Also, what do you think about the relative merits between the Hornby 25, the Heljan 25 and the Bachmann 25? I really would love to hear from you. Please check out the merch too at the merch store, and we've got the Monday Club wagons still available to order, and do hurry because they are selling fast. But until next time, you take great care of yourself. Happy modelling. Bye for now. Today's video is sponsored by Chromatic, makers of DCC decoders designed to be fully compatible with every manufacturer's locomotive. Visit train-o-matic.com to browse the full range and see what they've got suitable for you. Additional support comes from Rocar Prototype Models, where detail, accuracy and value for money go hand in hand. With their debut model of SafePack auto racks wowing model railroaders alike, now is your chance to order these in road names and configurations to accurately reproduce auto rack workings from 1974 to the present day on your model railroad. Order today from rocarmodels.com and see the full range for yourself. I'd like to send out a huge thanks to everybody who supports me on Patreon, and an extra special huge thanks goes out to Anthony Kidson, Offshore Allen, Michael Lockie, Helen Sink, Gary Lewis, David Quinn, Sparky 107 George Botterini, Chris Moss, Robert Steers, Sam Yates, Dale Williams, John N from NC, NYMRish, Jonathan Foster, Peter, Clifford Ison, Larry W. Grant, NI Railways 4000 class, Ian Coulson, Alan Dickerson, Eddie Papere, Karen Nichol, Medwin Williams, Crossways Point Junction, 3B Rail, Jennifer Horton, and James Beckett. Thank you. Without you guys, I couldn't do this.